Personality theory at work and social networks. Joe is the ex-husband and now widower of a very good friend from childhood named Jane. Joe's personality and behavior are well documented through conversations with Jane and through her friends and family's comments on how Joe treated his wife. For about a year prior to their divorce, Joe began to display attention-seeking behavior through manipulation. He was jealous, defensive, and controlling of Jane. He would attempt to draw attention through outrageous flirting and grand displays of emotion, anger, or elation. Social learning theory would suggest Joe to have grasped early on through observational learning how these behaviors would garner the responses and attention he desired. It was also apparent Joe did not care if the attention was good or bad. Although I've only known him in adulthood, I would speculate Joe lacked attention or was rewarded only for bad behavior as a child. He's now learned to use these methods as an adult to manipulate those in his immediate surroundings. Tragically, Jane died of suspicious causes last February. Joe's social media feed in the short time before this reflected someone who was left behind, bitter, and who felt rejection and betrayal. He used various social media tactics through memes and posts to once again garner the attention he so desperately needs. Within about 2 weeks of Jane's death, Joe's social media presence changed. He began a very heavy-handed social media campaign accusing a doctor colleague of my friend of illegally prescribing her prescription medication for pain and causing her accidental overdose. He also began to reflect on all his experience with Jane while married and referred to her as his angel. Joe continued to post long rants of injustice at the loss of his angel and also share very personal information such as the actual autopsy. Joe's posts were draped in heroism on my friend's behalf, but to myself and others it was contradictory. Joe's behavior, though appearing to be champion-like, was really part of his self-serving bias, where we tend to perceive and present ourselves in favorable ways. Alfred Bandura proposed there are mediational processes we follow which reinforce and shape our behavior and personality. Joe must have noticed early on how best to evoke sympathy in others, and the strength of these reactions would have supported the retention phase and fed the will to reproduce such behavior. When Joe finally received negative feedback for his behaviors, it was not powerful enough to prevent him from using other tactics. For instance, Jane divorcing him only allowed him to use these perceived injustice as a way to gain more sympathy via social media friends. Another powerful social learning system, the Cognitive Affective Processing System, or CAPS, developed by Walter Mischel, describes this as a motivational process activated in a social environmental context. CAPS recognizes that these processes and patterns are formed through experience and often operate rather automatically and outside of awareness. Joe continues to post almost daily to my friend's timeline. He often uses ribbon charity memes associated with loved ones left by someone who has overdosed, and he usually adds some comment about never giving up on justice and fighting the good fight. Others who may not know him or my friend's relationship well often reply with supportive and sympathetic responses conveying their distress at his broken heart and apparent misfortune. Unfortunately, Jane's family are not very active on social media, and this allows Joe unvetted access to her Facebook wall to garner the sympathy and attention he seeks. Every profile picture Joe shares is one of he and Jane while married, and he often posts random photos reiterating how their perfect life has been senselessly shattered. While the social learning theory can help us understand how Joe may have arrived at this point in his personality development, the multipath approach to personality, MAP, can provide a more in-depth way of approaching his behavior. The MAP consists of a neuropersonal, intrapersonal, interpersonal, exopersonal, ecopersonal, and transpersonal dimensions to personality. The neuropersonal self, for instance, would allow us to see how Joe is driven by his temperament or biological mechanisms. He continues to display reactionary and volatile behavior with regards to Jane. From an intrapersonal perspective, related to his self-identity, we can see Joe identifies most often as a victim, and this is characterized by habitual thinking patterns displayed as a constant theme. The other dimensions are associated to relationship forming, the cultural societal self, the global planetary self, and the collective unity consciousness, which are not necessarily apparent through a social media lens.